Well, hi, you beautiful New Zealanders. In today's video, we're carrying on our video about Margaret Mutu and why she's delusional. This is part 3. So if you missed out on part 1 and 2, just go back and have a look at those. Alright, so what's in the box today? In this video, I'm commenting on the interview between Michael Laws and Maori activist Margaret Mutu. In this segment of the interview, she claims New Zealand is a Maori nation. Now that's really interesting, so watch this.
This country, I thought everybody who was in this country knew that this country is Maori. It is a Maori country. Maori invited other people to come and live here. We did that through a treaty, and we are part of this country. So to exclude us from those 5-year-old children and their readers can only be seen as an act of supremacy, where you can control what those children have and then deny those who have not got the power their right to be there with those children. That is racism, and that is, in this case, white supremacy. So,
all right. Can I just ask you? All right, I understand your philosophy, Margaret, but can I just ask you, and just something you just stated at the front, when you say this is a Maori country, does that mean it's exclusively a Maori country, or does that mean that Maori are a part of this country?
No. This country is a Maori country. We are the ones who have been here for, 1,000, 1,500 years.
Yeah.
And when the English first arrived here in the late 1700s and then in the 1800s, we invited them. And we entered into a formal agreement with the Queen of England at the time, Queen Victoria, to say, look, some of your people are already here, but some of them are pretty lawless. Could you please come and make sure that they abide by the law? And that was agreed.
So that's your interpretation of the Treaty of Waitangi, is it? That it's an invitation, not a document between two peoples, but an invitation, number one. And number two, it's really designed to regulate white people. It's not designed to sort out any particular problems that was in Maori society at the time.
No, the problem so the treaty, of course, was preceded by He Hakaputanga, which is the Declaration of Independence that set out very clearly that this was a Maori country. Very, very clear. The treaty carried on. It was an addendum to the declaration. Now, the treaty confirmed the declaration, confirmed that this was a Maori country.
Okay, so there you have it. She says that the treaty confirmed that this is a Maori country. Well, let's have a look at this. Margaret says this is a Maori nation, and I thought everyone knew that. She comes to this conclusion on the basis of 3 historical events, all of which are contestable. Number 1, Maori were first here in these islands, and therefore the islands belong to Maori, finders keepers as it were. This is what she maintains. That's what she's really saying. Number 2, Maori achieved sovereignty over these islands via He Whakaputanga in 1835, i.e. that's the Declaration of Independence. So that she's saying that, we got sovereignty then and we still have sovereignty now. It's a Maori nation. Number 3, Maori had their sovereignty confirmed via the treaty in 1840. This is what the 3 things that Margaret Mutu is actually saying. So what are we to make of this? Well, regarding point 1, there is much alternative and credible evidence in existence that Maori were not the first here. There's lots of evidence, actually. But let's just concede to Maori, but let's just concede point 1 to Margaret and let this slide, okay? So there are 13 proofs. Regarding point 2, that Maori achieved political independence via He Whakaputanga is also not a settled historical fact either. Scholars do not agree that Maori achieved political independence as a result of the Declaration of Independence 1835. However, let's also concede point 2 to Margaret and let that one slide also. So what about point 3? Well, this is not up for debate. Maori definitely ceded sovereignty, even though 1 or 2 captured New Zealand historians getting a salary from the government, and 1 or 2 bodies like the Waitangi Tribunal say they didn't cede sovereignty. Well, how can we be certain that Maori ceded sovereignty? There are 13 proofs, but here are just 3. Okay, these are the 3 big ones really. The speeches of the chiefs at Waitangi on the 5th of February 1840, some said they would not sign because they did not want to cede sovereignty. Some of the chiefs said, we're not going to sign this treaty because we know what sovereignty is all about, and we're not going to cede sovereignty. We don't want to cede sovereignty. Now, we know that from the chiefs and their speeches at Waitangi on the 5th of February. Number 2, the British sought out and got all the signatures of those who signed the Declaration of Independence 1835, making sure these same chiefs signed the treaty. In this way, the treaty superseded the declaration, because if you've achieved sovereignty in 1835 through the declaration, and then you ceded sovereignty in 1840, then the Treaty of Waitangi supersedes the Declaration of Independence. It just makes sense. Number 3, in 1843, the British declared in their parliament that its sovereignty over New Zealand was incontrovertible. That's an interesting word. This word means cannot be argued against. So there you go. All right. So, but perhaps the best proof of all is the affirmation of the 144 chiefs who gathered for a month at Kohimarama in 1860. Most of you will be very familiar with this conference. There was a conference held in 1860 between Governor Gore Brown, Donald Maclean, and 144 chiefs. These were important chiefs. These were not just tin pot chiefs. Many of these chiefs have signed the treaty in 1840, so they were meeting 20 years later, which is a long time to think about the treaty, to think about how British government was going and their relationship with the British was going. As I say, they had 20 years to trial the treaty and contemplate its content and meaning. At the end of the conference, these 144 chiefs made a number of affirmations. The most crucial affirmation is pictured on the right. There it is. That's actually a screenshot from the actual documents that were recorded at the time. And it says this: Proceedings of the Kohimarama Conference, resolution adopted by the conference on the 10th of August 1860. That's pretty much the last day of the conference. And it says, the chiefs having assembled at the conference hall, Paikea, that's a chief, rose and proposed the following resolution. Notice it was a chief who proposed the resolution. It wasn't one of the British staff. Quote, that this conference takes cognizance of the fact that the several chiefs, that he's meaning the 144, members thereof, that's the people who are at this meeting, are pledged to each other to do nothing inconsistent with their declared recognition of the Queen's sovereignty, comma, and of the union of the two races, colon, also to discontinuance of all proceedings tending to a breach of the covenant, he means the treaty, that's the covenant, here solemnly entered into by them. So he's saying that Maori ceded sovereignty. Now look at the bottom. Seconded by Te Manahira Ruia, Mr. Maclean then said, let those chiefs of the conference who approve of this hold up their hands. And what do we see? The resolution was carried unanimously. So the significant 144 chiefs who came from all over New Zealand in 1860 made a resolution that they ceded sovereignty to the Queen. Look at that. That's very, very significant. You know, it's clear, isn't it? The Maori chiefs themselves said they ceded sovereignty. But let's not leave the question of cession of sovereignty here. As I said, there are other compelling proofs. Now, I have written about these proofs, detailing them in a document called 13 Irrefutable Proofs that Maori ceded sovereignty, which is in the description of this video. So, when Margaret says, this is a Maori nation, we ought to respond by saying, well, it was until you ceded sovereignty in 1840, Margaret, at which point you gave over to the British the right to govern New Zealand completely and forever. In other words, as a result of the treaty, New Zealand lost its status as an independent Maori nation and became a British colony. That's just the facts of history. So, Margaret is completely wrong when she says New Zealand is a Maori nation. She's either lying or she's just history ignorant. Astonishingly, Margaret goes on in the interview to infer that she knows more about the meaning of the treaty than the chiefs who signed it. She plays the card, I'm a linguist, a lot in the interview. But I would say, so what that you're a linguist? The question must be asked, who has the greater authority to give us the true meaning of the treaty? The chiefs at Kohimarama, who were 20 years removed from the event, many of whom signed the actual treaty, and who had no political barrow to push, Or Margaret Mutu, who is trying to tell us its meaning 85 years after its signing, a person who has a reputation for being a fanatically and ideologically driven Maori activist. Well, who has the authority? The chiefs way back then, or Margaret Mutu in 2025? Come on. And I'm going to finish with this. This is a Marxist strategy that Margaret is using. Well, you know the answer as to who has the most authority. It's definitely the 144 chiefs. Well, such is the parallel universe in which Margaret is living. She is using a particular Marxist strategy to try and take control of New Zealand. Namely, if we tell a lie often enough, people will eventually believe it. The bigger the lie, the better. Now, that's a Marxist strategy to take over a country. And that is what Margaret is using.